welcome to all of you. This is the last, but I promise it'll be the most fun event of the day. Thank you very much for holding out till this time. If it's any consolation, there is a bottle of bubbly for the best question. So hang around. My name is Nitish Mathew. I lead data engineering and governance for Afterpay, and it is my absolute pleasure and privilege to actually welcome our esteemed audience to this discussion forum. We've got Caroline, Zainab, and Joe from far away, all the way from Salt Lake City, Utah, as well. And we've got people from Perth and Sydney, even though, you know, Sydney, these are small towns compared to our wonderful Melbourne, but we'll take them. So, Caroline, Zainab, Joe, would you like to just kick off with a small introduction?
Sure. I haven't had the time to test, but it seems to be working. So testing done. That's one thing. Hi, I'm Caroline. I work for a company called ROKT. It's one of the sponsors of the event. I'm a software and data engineer. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Testing in production. My name is Zainab Maleki, and I'm a technical principal consultant at Mechanical Rock, all the way from Perth, Western Australia.
Hey, what's up? I'm Joe Reis. I'm from the USA. I'm also a data engineer, data architect, been in data for over 20 years. Do podcasts, Monday Morning Data Chat, if anyone wants to check that out. It's really good. You should check it out. Also, co-author of Fundamentals of Data Engineering, which is the first definitive book about data engineering. And along with the bubbly that will be given away to the best question, I'll also be giving away this last signed copy that I have of this book. So ask good questions. Get rewarded accordingly. So,
great. Thank you very much. Joe, you literally wrote the book on data engineering, right?
Yep.
What could be a better question than to start off with? What exactly is data engineering?
I want to ask the crowd this. I'm always curious what people think data engineering is. Somebody in this general direction, what do you think data engineering is? You have to count of three. Thanks. That's really good. How about over here?
Making data available for end-to-end consumers.
Good. Yeah.
Problem solving data.
Awesome. I like these answers. So I can tell you what data engineering is not. Data engineering is not data pipelining with Spark and ETL with this or that technology. Data engineering at the end of the day is about taking raw data from source systems, doing something to make it useful for downstream consumption, typically by analytics, machine learning, data science, whatever. So that's, in a nutshell, what data engineering is.
That's great. Joe, just a follow-up question, right? How do you define success?
So it's interesting. In data, we always talk about providing value, right? Value is also one of these trick words where if I ask you what value means, I think it's a very subjective thing. My favorite definition of value comes from the book Lean Thinking, where it's basically ultimately what does a customer find valuable, typically from a product perspective. And so success to me with data engineering means is your customer happy? Or are they getting what they want?
Great. I love it. I mean, is your customer happy?
Hopefully you're happy too. Yeah. But when your customer's happy, you'll be happy. So, yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to add on to
Please.
that if you don't mind. And I say, as a data engineer, your customers is often internal teams within your company or wherever you work. And so sometimes your customer being happy means just the consumer teams being happy, being able to handle the data efficiently in a timely manner without having to ask multiple questions to multiple other members of the data platform. What's the data? Where does it come from? When is it available? So, yeah.
It sort of nicely ties to many of the aspects you mentioned today morning about self-service, right? So, and I would love to get back to this beautiful phrase, elite teams, right? Elite teams lead to success, I would assume, right? What's the secret sauce? What are the things that you've seen in real life with teams which are elite?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of elite teams in software engineering, software delivery teams, and the secret is they try to decouple themselves and remove the dependencies that makes them slow. Like, for example, not having someone else to deploy their applications. They build it, they run it, they maintain it. They do the whole end-to-end ownership of their application so they don't have dependencies. Or manual testing. It's slow, it takes us time. It's dependency on someone else testing our applications. So they write automated testing, they become an elite team, they can move fast.
So, but it is by definition a very rare thing, right? I mean, we don't see a lot of elite teams. Is it organizational culture? Is it leadership? What is missing that we don't see more of elite teams?
I think it's a cultural change. We see it in a lot of new teams and teams that are willing to change the ways that they're used to do things. And the ways that we're used to, it wasn't fast. That's why we're trying to look at different ways. And unless you're willing to change, you can't become an elite team.
Okay, so the team has to actually feel like, hey, this is interesting, this is useful. I mean, all of you have heard a lot of amazing things from Zainab today morning. I mean, are you driven enough to say, this is good, I need to be elite, I need to change? And that takes a little bit of inherent drive, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, that's great. And then, Caroline, just coming back to you, right? I understand you guys ROKT moved from a data lake to a lake house architecture. And what were some things you learned? What was the motivation for that change and the things that you would like to share to the audience?
Yeah, sure. I think I'm going to build on top of what a lot of our amazing speakers have been telling all day in their talks. And yeah, it's great to hear everyone's story about the way they build and create or the way they think about, building this infrastructure that is able to manage your data, ingest it and make it consumable. And on top of that, adding security and adding governance. And there's just so many things to think about. And I think, we've heard Rogan talking about data warehouse, and it was almost a thing of the past, right? It's still very much like a thing of the present, but you can only put so much load on a data warehouse until it starts showing its limits. So data warehouse is mostly a tool that is designed for data analytics and to empower your business intelligence team to basically drive data analysis for your business. And on the other hand, data lake, until recently, were mostly really a bunch of data that's dumped on cold storage like S3, and it's hardly usable. So it doesn't have the feature, the SQL feature that the data warehouse provides that really makes it easily queryable and discoverable and these kind of things. And so what we've built is a solution in the middle. So you think data lake and data warehouse become this lake house concept where you put data still on cold storage, so it's cheap to store, but you add some smarts on top of it, so it's easy to query, and it has like the modern features of a data warehouse. And doing that really offloaded the pressure of our warehouse cluster. We use AWS, so we use Redshift, in order to empower teams to basically run their data analytics fast without coming back to us and say, oh my God, why is my query not running? And why am I competing with the machine learning jobs on the cluster? And oh my God, my query has been aborted and this kind of thing. So yeah, the lakehouse was really good in that respect.
Have you seen any benefits after the change has been done? How long have you been in production with the lakehouse?
Yeah, so it's an ongoing project, and we've been in production for almost a year now, but still adding features on top of it. Definitely, I think one of the best outcomes was our internal customer team. The data analytics stopped complaining all the time about the query being slow or not running at all. And also our internal team, like machine learning, being able to finally run some data-intensive jobs on S3 without impacting anyone else.
Okay, great. Thank you. We've heard a lot about data mesh today, so I've got a couple of questions to our panelists on data mesh. So Joe, what are your thoughts on the data mesh? What I'd love to, you've talked to a lot of clients as part of your work, as part of writing the book, etc. Right? What is really happening in the world, and what are the messages that you would like to pass on to the people here, right?
Well, I think data mesh is As I even explained to Zhamak, I think it's a utopian ideal, which I think everyone should strive to move toward. I also feel like we're at an interesting inflection point with data mesh, where I feel like there's also potentially a lot of misappropriation of the term, and I think confusion about what it ultimately means. I mean, ultimately, if you go back to Zhamak's canonical definition, it's about decentralization. You basically apply the same principles of domain-driven design and microservices to data. So, but it's not a technology, right? And it's not this, that, or the other thing. And my fear is that it's going to become a religion or a cult. And so I hope that people can at least take the time to read, Zhamak's, book, Data Mesh, read the original articles, and I say, and try and say true to, I would say, what she was trying to envision, which again is just decentralization. That's all it is, right? And this is not a new concept. This has been around for decades in software, and so that's a lot of my thoughts on it. But again, I think it's one of the best ideas I've seen in decades, frankly.
Yeah. Can I add to that? I often see people getting confused about the decentralization, and they say, like, do we need to decentralize our data? Is that what data mesh is saying? And my interpretation, which could be wrong, is it's not about decentralizing your data. You don't need like so many multiple versions of data warehouses. You can have one data warehouse, you can have multi-tenancy, but then decentralize the way that you're looking at it and architect your data in a decentralized way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go even stronger to that. Like, you really don't want to have multiple copies of your data everywhere. You want to have one copy of, like, what's the source of truth and being able to build on top of that. And yeah, another thing, you're talking about data warehouse, have one data warehouse. I think, actually, Rogan mentioned it, and yeah, I think streaming is definitely like a power tool within the data engineering field. It's very important. It is the future combined with other tools that already exist. In the way that streaming really allows teams to be decoupled and move fast efficiently. If I've got, the Kafka streams, one topic, anyone can consume from it, and if you have a schema like Avro on top of it, the data governance exists out of the box, and you also have backwards and forwards compatibility.
At the end of the day, though, I mean, it's not really like a streaming or a data warehouse or that type of discussion. Data mesh is much about, I mean, here's the deal. It's almost 100% organizational at the end of the day, right? Who's heard of Conway's Law? Yeah, right? So basically, Conway's Law describes a phenomenon where in an organization, you're going to design systems around the way you communicate as a company or as an organization. So if you're inherently siloed, decentralization is impossible, right? I mean, tell me how that would work. And so really, in organizations where data mesh could be achieved, Zhamak herself describes it as a socio-technical phenomenon, highlighting the socio part. It's an organizational thing at the end of the day, just like microservices is. I mean, microservices can't work if you have, again, a siloed way of thinking, right? And so and so again, I would say you really have to assess the organization itself and whether or not you are healthy enough to, I wouldn't say healthy, just whether you're capable of doing it or not, frankly. And the thing is, don't feel bad if you can't. Like, a lot of companies suck at microservices too. It doesn't mean you're like a crappy company. It just means you communicate poorly.
I think the word communication is very interesting, and I'm halfway through your book, and you have so many references to people should be talking more to each other, right? Not less. Self-service and independent decoupled teams doesn't mean you stop talking.
No, that's. I mean, okay. Let me ask you this: if you could automate your processes and avoid communicating with your teams, just envision what that looks like. How does that make you feel? Do you think that would work? If everything was just an API call to like every other department, right? So.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what we were talking earlier about adoption, right? If you stop communicating, that's also one of the reasons why people don't adopt the the shiny new system that you've built that's going to make everyone's life easier and faster. One of the drivers of adoption is also leaving space to the team to be able to adopt that technology. So you have to make sure that you actually communicate effectively within your priorities. Like if you set up your objective quarters and everything, you do have to leave that space to, we need to do that migration to that new technology. Yeah. But yeah, communication.
And Can you guys think of an actual company, right? You don't need to name the company, who actually got this right and who are actually seeing the fruits of this model, this way of thinking?
Ooh, well, stay tuned on Monday morning. So I'm actually interviewing somebody who I think a lot of people claim that this company's actually done data mesh. So Monday morning data chat, type it into your phone, subscribe to it on Spotify. But the podcast, we're going to be interviewing Omar from Roche, the pharmaceutical company, about this. So it should be pretty cool. And again, this person, was vetted by the people who came up with data mesh, and also who was it that got the intro from? Was it Ken Graziano, right? Who knows a thing or two about data. So.
And what about you, Zainab?
Yeah, we worked with one of the clients that they're in later stages of their journey towards data mesh architecture, and other clients where they're early stages, and obviously because they're a bigger enterprise, it takes them a lot longer.
Okay. And thank you. I think that'll be really good. I think if we can understand what people have already done, and we can shamelessly copy, life is so much easier. Right?
Yeah, I mean, these success things help, right? But I think it's also, how many people have heard people doing data mesh in the real world? Or claiming to, right? And so it's this weird thing where it's like people saying they saw the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or something. It's cool because it just takes one. Can I go on a quick tangent real quick?
Please.
So it reminds me of a lot of discussions I had with Bill Inman, who created the data warehouse. He told me basically, like, did you know that when the data warehouse, when he first came up with the idea, it fell on dead ears. Like, nobody wanted to talk about this thing at all. Like, data warehousing was, it was a discussion point that nobody wanted to talk about. But it took one, and then two, and then three, and then, it became the most popular, data paradigm in the world, and we're all, we use it without really understanding the term, without understanding the history of it. But at that point in time, it was actually written off. And so, but it took. So it's these few success cases that you really need to get it going.
Yeah.
I was going to add that one of the success factors that I've seen in the client that we helped them with data mesh was the sense of ownership and communications. So it was very well defined within each of the business domains that, yes, we understand data is our problem, it's not someone else's problem. Yes, we understand it, and they were willing to take the ownership, and they were willing to get on board.
Okay, yeah, hence the socio-technical aspect of what Shamak says, right? Yeah, and one question to you, Caroline, is let's say you built this architecture, you have things in production right now. If load were to increase by 10x, right, how would you think about the delivery model that you have right now? Would you change anything?
By 10x, you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, it's always a question. I think we're in really good positions where we can really scale our infrastructure quite well, so we can do, horizontal scaling in a good fashion.
And from a data delivery point of view, right? Mm-hmm. Do you see any change and expectations from, say, the application teams? Hey, you should be sending more things yourself, you should be taking more accountability. Because I think many of us in companies struggle with that as to how do you convince people to take more ownership, that word again.
Yeah, I mean, look, like given the scale of our data right now, I wouldn't expect it to grow by 10x, by tomorrow, but, we're lucky if it does. Definitely 2, 3, 4, and I think it is a long-term discussion. You talked about communication, and it is definitely a long-term discussion with the internal teams to actually think about these problems. Also, it's not just a load on the data platform, but it's how it impacts every other team and what they've built on top. But yeah, I think I think we're in a good position if we scale horizontally to be able to increase that load. And then every little system, like for example, the Spark streaming app that we have in order to load the data from the Kafka streams into our lakehouse, we potentially would have to review that and review the memory and constraints things, but it's not something that would,
No, great, thank you. Joe, I think we are running short of time. I'll probably ask some very quick questions. Joe, you self-describe yourself as a recovering data scientist.
Yes.
Are the data engineers that bad? I mean, what's the backstory?
Well, I'm a recovering data scientist. I was addicted to data science for a long time, but you know, I found help, and now I'm a better person. So, but where does it come from, right? So, you know, I've been in data for a long time, and I've been doing machine learning before it was called, I guess, data science. It was, you know, I guess conjoined with the term, and so. And I remember, you know, throughout the 2010s, who was doing data in the 2010s? Anybody? Probably half the room. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, so I'm sure you can remember, right? Especially if you're doing data science, you'd be hired to go do data sciencey things. I mean, there was a time when data scientists were basically considered like magicians. It's like just show up and then wave your wand and like, you know, magic, like unicorns will fly and like rainbows will, you know, crazy stuff, right? And you get to these you know, these jobs, these gigs, these companies, and they don't have any data upon which you can do the science, right? Or, and then basically they say, well, you're pretty smart, you're good at data. Why don't you just build the systems that, you know, so you can do your job? And I was like, I would like to do my job, but you know, when I was hired to do that, not, you know, do the prerequisite work to do it. But here we are. So that's, I think, doing that over and over again, especially in the early days of ML, where there weren't frameworks. Right? You know, I was writing ML code in Java back in the day because I think sklearn was like brand new, and well, you know, you just had to do things in, you know, on GPUs, and everything's by hand. So we've come a long way, but yeah, it was just, yeah, that's why I'm recovering. I felt like the term had been disabused of all the. I think there's so many expectations on the term and not enough hard work that went on behind it.
Yeah, I think we are hitting the trough of disillusionment of the data scientist term in the Gartner.
Yeah, and I was like the OG of like the recovering data scientist. So that was like, I think I gave myself that term in like 2016 or something.
Fair enough. Cool.
I trademarked it too. Yeah, so. In the US.
Yeah. We got 8 minutes. Love to get some questions from the audience. If we can pass the mic around. Any questions, anyone, for the panelists? Can be about anything today. At the back.
Just yell it out, or
Yeah. Oh,
I'm interested to know. So in 2 months' time, Gartner have got their DNA conference in Sydney, and as of today, there's one talk that happens to mention data security. I'm just interested in the back end of the Optus breach that was announced on Friday. The industry always over responds to these things. So, you know, it won't surprise me if there's a dozen talks by this time next week in that same conference. I'm just interested in your views on what the response from the industry will be, and what the reasonable response, and also the overreach response that will inevitably happen when these things occur as well.
Maybe to explain some context to Joe about what happened with the Optus data breach.
Yeah, so Optus is, Optus is, well,
Sucks for them though.
it's I believe the second biggest telco provider, and 8 to 9 million consumers, one of who is me. I also got an email 3 days of last Thursday saying your name, date of birth, your ID, everything may be out there. Best of luck. So, so that's the backstory. So this is very hot right now. So, what are your thoughts? Anybody can jump in.
I think it's a long journey in terms of data security and correcting the bad behaviors that we're doing already. I've seen horrible things in different places that data engineers or people that have admin access, we connect our dashboards and Tableau and like Power BI with system users rather than like people's privileges or like, you know, people's user accounts. And I've seen really, really horrible ways. Up until our databases, we're very careful. Like, you know, like the software databases, there are application data, we're very careful. But then as soon as it gets after it, like we do really, really bad stuff. and I think it's a long journey. Like you've got to set up security from the start into the way that you're handling data. And if you can't fix it from the start, it's really hard. And people can talk about it a lot. There is a breach going around, but unless they're willing to start fixing it from the beginning, I think it'll be a long way that we see data security being handled properly.
Thank you.
I mean, there's a reason that security has its own chapter in the book here, chapter 10. It's also one of the undercurrents, because it's like, you screw this up, like you're out of a job, basically. Like, so you guys can come up with the fanciest data pipelines and modeling and all that crap, but like, if your name's on the breach, something happened on your watch or something you designed, you can kiss your job goodbye. I can guarantee you that. At least in the States. I don't know what you do here. Maybe you'll get like a promotion or something. But the other thing is too, it's like security, you're always fighting yesterday's war, right? So that's part of the problem. I'll bring it back to something at stateside, which is Uber, right? So that was basically some idiot giving up password and username through like a phone call or an email or something, right? So as we point out in the book, security starts and ends basically with everybody in this room, right? Like, you are responsible for security, every single one of you. It's not really, I mean, definitely like lock down your S3 buckets and your servers and all that stuff, but like, don't click on stupid emails and get in a phishing campaign. Like, that's how most of this shit happens. Like, Colonial Pipeline in Florida, when that got shut down, that was somebody, a random employee clicking on an email, right?
Yep.
Don't do dumb things, first of all. Like, if somebody calls you, maybe call them back and then call their friends or their mom or something and just ask them like, hey, did you ask for my password? But I mean, it's stupid things like, because you are all the weakest link, every one of us.
Yeah, I think with a lot of people, how many of you have admin passwords or privileged accounts? A couple.
Oh wait, keep raising your hands. I want to get a photo of this.
So yeah, I think it's a lot of responsibility for us also. Now, any other questions?
Thank you for the sharing. So I'm pretty new to the field, and I have a question. So if you guys could give one piece of advice to yourself when you first joined the data engineering field, what would that be for you to, I don't know, what advice would you give to yourself to be good in this field or to succeed?
I think very simple for me is if you are lucky enough to work in a company where you've got great peers, just draw on the knowledge from, your team.
I would say it's, especially when you're starting out, understand what your goals are, right? Understand like what do you want to get out of this? You have a million career options, right? You can go work at Optum and help them with their security issues. They might also need a lot of people, anyway. So learning is a very interesting thing. I'm going to talk about this in my Sydney keynote as well, but there's an interesting balance in what you need to learn, right? So all too often what I see with data engineering, I can tell you how to be like a horrible data engineer. How about that? I'm going to tell you in the next 30 seconds how to be like the world's crappiest data engineer. So focus on only understand the technologies that you're using for your job, and don't bother understanding how they actually work at a fundamental level. Don't bother understanding the fundamentals of the data engineering life cycle. So, how data is ingested, how it's transformed, how it's stored, how it's served. Avoid all that stuff and just focus on what's directly in front of you at the time. And you'll be the world's worst data engineer. And so if you can, so that's, if I invert the question, just do that and you'll be very mediocre. And if you actually don't do that and focus on the bigger picture of your field and your career and your craft, that's how you become great. Right? But all too often, though, and this is why I wrote the book, is there's a ton of horrible advice on data engineering and how to become a data engineer. So, definitely don't learn Pig. I know there's a lot of articles that tell you to learn that. that's probably not relevant these days. So, or Hadoop, you don't need that.
I think I had to think about it, but one advice that I think about is challenge the norms. Always the way that things are used to be and things are the way that they are, they're not the best way. So sometimes when you are fresh and you have a fresh view of things, you might be able to challenge and find better ways of doing it.
Great question. Thank you. I think we're running short of time, but maybe we have time for one last question.
Right. Hi, I'm Letian and I work for Atlassian, and I want to thank you for the discussion and the answers. And I'm definitely not talking about my employer here, but if you come to a data organization with significant communication gap and silo problems, what would you do to fix it?
It was a question, what would you do to fix a siloed
siloed data org with communication issues?
Oh, well, I mean, if you could solve that problem, I mean, you would be like probably the world's richest person. It's not an easy question, right? I mean, it really has to come from the top at the end of the day. That's how this stuff gets done. And it has to come from the bottom, though, too, so kind of like this. But the problem is, when you do this, what's in the middle here? That's middle management, right? And what is the incentive of middle management? Bingo, exactly. So there's an old quote from Charlie Munger, it's Warren Buffett's business partner, and he says, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome, right? This is like the golden rule of the universe. If you just remember like that sentence alone, show me the incentive and show me the outcome, like you're able to figure out like how basically the entire universe works, at least with people. And so if there's no incentive to change the communication structure of a company, the outcome will be that you have siloed, crappy communication, and that's that. And this is actually sometimes by design. Keep in mind, this benefits people. We all want to do decentralization and a non-siloed communication, but it's like, this exists for a reason. So.
Yep.
I think, yeah, like short one, you ask how and what would you do, but yeah, like you just said, why is important, so understanding why and spending time understanding why is that way may already provide some answers.
I think the last thing, one thing that helps is taking initiatives. If you see silos happening, take that initiative and break it. Like for example, I was working for a client that each of the teams, they were doing their own thing. So I started creating these meetups and guilds to talk about, hey, look, we're doing this other way, this way, and you're doing it that way. Let's share, like let's knowledge share and kind of learn from each other.
Great. Great. I think we're slightly over time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joe, Zainab, and Caroline. Excuse me. I think we have the prize for the best question. I let
Yes,
you pick it.
absolutely. Who do we think, Nitish, or who's going to pick this amazing prize, or the winner of the amazing prize?
You guys can pick.
So
What is that?
it's a bottle of champagne,
From courtesy Afterpay.
courtesy of Afterpay.
You don't have to pay. It's free.
But
So is it on a payment plan? Is that how that works? Okay.
well, we always love a newcomer to data engineering, so
Yeah.
congratulations.